The Leave Your Legacy podcast is supported by Wise Financial. Wise Financial is a Northwestern Mutual private client group member. For over 20 years, Wise Financial has dedicated its efforts to designing comprehensive wealth management strategies for business owners and many accomplished athletes. Through their efforts, Wise Financial has been recognized as an industry-leading firm. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hello and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Kenyon Murray, and today we have a special solo podcast. And this one is obviously very, very personal to me, and something that I had to create in my life in order to continue down the path of being the best version of myself every day. And so just a little bit of backdrop before we talk about what I call the 4 E's of personal growth. About 5 years ago, and I've talked about this pretty candidly, my wife and I got to a point in our marriage where we had to make a decision. Were we going to stay together? Were we going to split up? You know, our daughter was in high school. Our boys had just graduated. And it was one of those things like we really had to figure it out. But what came out of it was personal counseling, marriage counseling. And in that part, I knew that the first thing I had to do was look in the mirror. And I had to be accountable and take the things that I was most afraid of and turn them into positives. And part of that was, all right, I have to look myself in the mirror and figure out what do I need to change in my life in order to be the best man. And in doing so, I could be a better husband and I could be a better father. I could be a better friend. And so as we're going down this path of counseling, which I've said it before, I think everybody should do some sort of counseling. It's really good and therapeutic. But as we're going down this path, I knew that I had things that I was afraid to face. And those were the things that I pushed down. Those were the things that when I pushed them down further and further, they actually manifested themselves in things that were not healthy for me personally, were not healthy for me spiritually, and definitely were not positives for our marriage. And my wife made the point, I don't care if we stay together. If we're not married, we're not married. That's great. You've always been a good father. I want you to be a good man. And so down this journey, it started with reestablishing my faith, being able to lean into something that's greater than me, putting people around me that held me accountable. And I think by doing that, I know by doing that, I was able to start this path of personal growth. And so for my 4 E's of personal growth, number one, establish. You have to establish habits that will help you maximize every part of your life. And for me, that's meditation, it's prayer, exercise, nutrition, education, and mentorship, pouring into other people. And so when you create or establish habits, the best thing to do is write those down, to have visual markers of those things that you need to do each and every day. And it's not easy. When you try to consciously think about everything that you do that will be a positive impact on your day and thus your life, it can be daunting. It can be one of those things like you wake up every day like, I don't know if I can do this. And that's where I was. But I knew that by establishing habits, I was going to be able to go down the road that I needed to go down, at least start. But like I said, everything kind of had to come into focus for me. I had to do other things. It wasn't just about the decisions I made and how they affected me. It was about how the decisions I made affected the closest people around me. And that is one of the things that's really hard, because if you surround yourself with the wrong people, it's really, really easy to fall back into old habits. And for me, I had a Bible study group, and those men, though most of them I would say 15 to 20 years older than me, as the only African-American in the group, it's kind of interesting to be able to, one, learn from these men, have them pour into me, but also be able to be accountable to them as a man. And I think those are the things that we sometimes don't have as men. We don't surround ourselves with the right people. So number one, 4E is establish. My second of the 4 E's is execute. And so by establishing habits, it's going to be an ongoing process and you will stumble. So while you're establishing these habits, the only way to see results is to execute those habits, right? So you have to put your plan in motion, and no journey, I don't care how smart you think you are, or, how much, you're a doer and you're just like, this is going to happen. Any journey is going to have you execute what you've put in place. And so by executing these habits, you definitely will see positive results. You'll definitely see some negative results. You'll definitely stumble. But one of the things about your personal growth is it's ongoing. It never stops. It does not stop until the day you leave this earth. I think that's the one thing that we have to understand, is that in this life, you have to continue to grow. You have to continue to change. You have to continue to challenge yourself to be the best version of yourself, because there's going to be so many outside influences that can deter you from where you want to go. So the second of my 4 E's is execute. Now, 3rd E, evaluate. So going back to execute, I was a regional sales manager, and one of the things I was able to see results on were very tangible. You talk about sales growth, market share, those kind of things. In real life, you have to have personal markers and goals to see how those habits are really impacting your day to day. And that's where evaluate comes in, because yes, you've set habits. Some work, some don't. Yes, you've executed those habits. And now you can go back and evaluate, what are the things that are actually helping me and hurting me? So how do you do that? You have to take a step back. And this is really the hardest thing to do, is to look in the mirror and say, okay, I have to be better, or I have to change this. And so that's where this whole evaluation process comes from. Your needs don't stay the same. Your desires don't stay the same. If you're, progressing in work, those things. So you think about all these outside things that are changing as you're trying to go through this personal growth journey. So you always have to evaluate, okay, what's working now? Because what worked early may not work now, and it may not work later. So you have to figure out, okay, what do I need to change? Where do I need to make some adjustments as I'm going down this journey? And this can be the hardest thing to do, because the one thing that we really don't like to do is an honest self-assessment, a personal inventory. And sometimes we go back to counseling, or not counseling, but comparison. And so where this comes in is like, okay, well, I'm doing this, this, and this. It may not be what I exactly want, but it's better than what somebody else is doing. Or, I'm in a better place than this person. I think that's where you start getting comfortable. And that's when you start to see that this plan that you've put into place really isn't working. And so those are the things that you have to do. So personal story about evaluation. As I go back and think about going through counseling with my wife, there would be times where I would say things that I didn't really know were triggers for her. And she would get upset, and I would get upset because I'm like, oh, I thought we were past this, and, this, that, and the other thing. But part of evaluation is like, okay, let's say I have 10 things on my list. Okay, these are the 10 habits that I'm going to put in place. And maybe 5 of them work, right? And the other 5 maybe sort of sometimes work or don't work. And so I have to evaluate this whole process. Okay, well, now what do I have to do to make sure that I don't create triggers for my wife when it comes to some of the past things we've gone through and we're trying to move on? Because the reality, and it's true, people can forgive you, but they never forget. And sometimes it may be the littlest thing that you don't think is very important, but it's one of those things that becomes a trigger that takes that person, that loved one, back to where they were when you guys were in the valley, so to speak. And so you have to evaluate what's working and what's not. And so that is a very, very important E in the 4 E's, because if you don't evaluate and you continue to do the same things, you become comfortable. And we know that we don't do our best work when we're comfortable. You have to be stressed. You have to be put in a situation where you have to look at it and go, okay, I need to change a few things. And so the fourth E, I think, is the most important E of the 4 E's of personal growth. And that's evolve. You have to evolve through this process. And the core meaning of evolution is the gradual development of something growing more complex. That means you have to have the ability to evolve through the choices that you make and intentions that you set every single day. It goes back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast about how conscious thought of what you say, what you do, how you act can be a very daunting thing. But that is the things that you have to do in order to evolve. Because if you're going down this journey and you don't evolve, why? Why make the journey if your end result is not to become the best version of yourself that you can? And that, once again, is becoming aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, your likes, your dislikes. All this subconscious programming and conscious choices can be very daunting, but out of that, you'll be pushed into a place that you want to go. So evolution, I think most people think of evolution as, I don't know, humans came from monkeys or apes or something like that. I think that's probably where most people go when they think about evolution. But I think evolution, when it comes to personal growth, starts with what you feel about yourself internally and where you draw your strength from. So for me, it's a place of faith. It's a place of I can lean against something that I know is greater than me. It's the people that I put around me that have helped me evolve because I can lean on them. It's creating a relationship with my wife that's one of transparency. It's one of common understanding, and it's a place of love. And so you have to understand how your soul, your mind, and your body operate if you hope to make a positive change. And that is the 4 E's of personal development. And, one thing I talked to Michelle about, as I was thinking about doing this podcast, was how deep do I go? I think one of the most important things in order for the 4 E's to actually move you along the journey that you're trying to make is this. From a faith standpoint, what do you believe in? What do you lean into when you have a weak moment? When it comes to accountability, who do you have around you that will hold you accountable to the daily decisions that you make? And for me, one of the most important and tangible things is, how is this journey going to make me a better man, husband, and father for the people that I love most? So everybody's journey is going to be different. But I think if you're able to take these 4 steps and make that part of your journey, I think you'll start to see things change for you. You'll start to see things change for the people around you. And a really funny story, I'll tell this. So like I said earlier, we were going through this process of trying to figure out if our marriage was going to work. And Chris and Keegan were actually going to be going to prep school. So they're 19 years old. And, it's just kind of funny as you think, maybe they don't see the things or hear the things that are going on. But they actually thought Michelle and I had split up because when they went to prep school, Michelle moved to Florida with them. So they thought that was the beginning of the end, which is hilarious now to talk back or to think about it back then, because we talked to them about everything that was going on. We never said anything about separation, but in their minds, like, okay, mom and dad are getting a divorce. This is it. So fast forward to, I believe it was their sophomore year at Iowa, and we're at home. They're home for a break or whatever, for dinner. And my wife says, I don't know how we didn't, choice word, mess you guys up. And only the way that Chris Murray could answer the question, he says, well, you almost did, and then walks out of the room. So it's so funny to think that, as adults, like we're keeping things from our kids, but kids are very intuitive. Obviously being around each other a lot, you kind of pick up on little things. And it's so funny too, because my wife actually said she had an exit plan. Like she was stashing money away to make sure that she could make the break clean when she had to. And so I look back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was so self-involved that I didn't see any of this. And that's what's scary, because like I look back now and I'm like, how was I that person 5 years ago? But I think that's what you have to do. And honestly, if you can't look back on things and learn from them, and for me, I chuckle at them now because I really don't understand like how I could be that self-absorbed. But, you know, it just goes to show that sometimes even when we have the right intentions, it doesn't come off the right way, and we have to have a plan. And so I'm so happy that I'm in a place where I can be transparent. I'm in a place where I can talk about the ups and downs of my marriage. I can talk about going to counseling and how that has not only helped me understand my partner, but it's also helped me understand myself. And part of that is being able to unpack all the layers that we push down, and we use those layers to create a protective barrier. But sometimes you're just shielding yourself from being the best version of yourself. So I'm not saying it's the end all be all. It's worked for me. And maybe there's some of you out there that'll work for you. So I want to thank you for joining me on this podcast. Remember, you can find this and all of our podcasts on the Talk About Network YouTube page. Remember, go there, give us a like, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you know when a new episode drops. I'd like to thank Wise Financial, Storyline Multimedia, and you, the audience, for making this happen. You can also go to iTunes, Spotify, or the iHeartRadio platform Spreaker to find this episode. I'm your host, Kenyon Murray. And remember, let's keep connecting. This podcast is sponsored by Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that specializes in creating high-quality video, photo, and audio productions for local businesses. Not only that, but they also produce a number of podcasts, including this one. So if you're interested in sharing the story of your business with the world, contact them today by visiting StorylineMultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters.